I'm Sarah Nelson. I'm one of the UROP staff members that works with the UROP program. We have a few other staff members in the office as well. Key ways that students frequently find their UROP. One, network. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to talk to as many people at the Institute as you can. And it could be your GRT, your graduate residence tutor in your dorm. Many UROP students on the daily basis in lab have a direct supervisor who is a grad student or a postdoc. But chances are you're going to be in a lab with a grad student, multiple grad students. So if you know any, talk to them. Ask them about their projects. Are they looking for a UROP? Or one of their peers or friends looking for a UROP student? Or even just, if their research doesn't interest you, what do you look for in a UROP? Things like that. Talk to your recitation instructors. Talk to your faculty. I can't emphasize that enough. Don't be afraid to go up to your professor after class or during office hours. Ask them about their research, their colleagues' research. Are they looking for UROPs, or do they know how their colleagues find their UROP students? UROP coordinators. Now, those are individuals in every UROP department, lab, and center who have to review all the proposals that come through their area. So we have on the UROP website a listing of all the UROP coordinators. So because they're looking at all the proposals that come through their area, they know who's doing what. And they are great resources. They're usually faculty, sometimes administrators, but they're great resources. And all the coordinators for every DLC, department, lab, and center, with their contact info is on the UROP website. So take a look at the areas that interest you and don't be afraid to reach out to them. Send them an email. You can talk to them about your personal interests and whether or not they know of any opportunities that might be a good fit, or individuals that you might want to reach out to. Fellow students, talk to your peers, talk to your friends, your dorm mates about UROP. Are they doing UROP? How they find their UROP. Also, they might be in a lab that really interests you, and they might know that someone in their lab's looking for a new student. So I've heard from UROP students that they found their UROP through a friend who brought them into lab one day. So you never know how you might find out about a UROP opportunity. We also on the UROP website have a project openings opportunities page. So it's a listings page that we will update regularly. And labs, supervisors can advertise on the website about a project they might have available and if they're looking for students. So if you were to go to there today, you'll see a whole range of projects, UROP opportunities that are available. It will always list the department, the faculty supervisor, and a little bit about the project and what they're looking for a student to contribute. Sometimes they'll list prerequisites. Depending on the project, where it's at, they might need a student with specific coursework, prior experience, or maybe if it's a programming related coding project, they might need you to know a specific programming language. Other projects don't list prereqs. They might be at a position where they're just willing to train any student who shows an interest and commitment to that project and to that lab. So you'll see quite a range. And then it always ends with the contact info. Who to contact. Sometimes it'll say, contact this person, include a copy of your resume or something about yourself. So don't be surprised if you see that. Speaking of a resume, make sure you have an updated resume when you're starting this process. Lots of supervisors are going to ask to see a copy of your resume, or they might want to meet you in person and ask you to bring one in. So have an updated resume ready to go. And speak with your ops staff. I meet with a number of students, as do my colleagues, one-on-one with students about their research interests. We like to learn a little bit about you, what your research interests are, and then we can give you advice on potential specific individuals that you could reach out to and contact. And since we also are reading all UROP proposals year-round, we know who's doing what. We know which faculty are very active in having UROPs in their labs, and so we can give you some specific advice. Topics to address. These are things to discuss with particular individuals you might be meeting with, interviewing with. And so again, this is trying to get at, what is the project, and figuring out if it would be a good fit for you and for them. So as you'll see, some key things to ask. What is the research project about, and what specifically would your role be? What would you be contributing? And the skills and knowledge. Not only what are you expected to possess, but what are you expected to learn? And how quickly might you need to learn it? Sometimes you might spend one whole term just getting caught up to speed and going through trainings, and then a subsequent term digging in deeper, depending on the nature of the research. Time commitment. This is very important. You want to be open and honest with a lab and a potential supervisor about what your schedule looks like in that term and what you realistically can contribute. Now, obviously throughout a term, some times of a term are really crazy, others you might hit a lull. Around midterms and exams, obviously you need to focus and study, but on average, they're going to want to know what you have to contribute on a weekly basis. And in terms of your schedule, some labs might need you to have a set schedule, especially in a wet lab, maybe in biology. You might need to go in every day or every other day to keep your cells alive. And it might have to be very precise, same time every day. Another lab, maybe it's in architecture or something of that nature, maybe you're coding a lot. You might have more flexibility in your schedule, and you might be able to work in your dorm room on your laptop. So you want to figure out what kind of schedule they would need you to keep. And if you hit a busy time in the term, are they okay if you work less one week? You might on average work 10 hours a week over the term, but come exam time, you might need to cut way back or take a week off. Are they okay with that? And how would you communicate that with a supervisor? Those are some things you would want to discuss with them. Participation preferences, say that 3 times fast. If they were to hire you, would they be able to pay you? Or if you wanted to be paid, would you need to apply for UROP funding? Or would this be for credit? How many units would it be for? This spring term, if you were to work 10 hours a week, would 10 to 12 units be appropriate? That's average. So being on the same page with them about those sorts of things. If you were to do it this spring for credit and you wanted to continue in the summer, would they maybe consider paying you in the summer? That's a long-term conversation, but things to be thinking about. Supervision and lab policies. Who would you be working with? Who would you be reporting to on a regular basis? What are the lab safety rules, requirements, policies? Would they expect you to show up to lab meetings? At the end of a term, would you have to write a report? What would it take for you to get an A in that UROP? What would an A look like in that UROP? Things like that. And these are also ongoing conversations you should have throughout a term, and especially if you're continuing on that same project in that same lab term to term. Revisit these topics with them. And discuss deliverables and outcomes, which I just sort of touched upon. Some UROP students end up being published in a journal article and being co-authors. How much work would you have to contribute to a project in order to earn co-authorship? If you're working in mechanical engineering, creating this really cool device, they might choose to patent it. Would you be able to be on that patent? What would that take? So once you've found the UROP, the next steps to take. One thing that we recommend is called Responsible and Ethical Conduct of Research. It's a training module that I believe is completely online. Anyone can take it, and I would highly recommend it. If you're on a project that receives NSF funding, then you're required to take it. So that would be another thing to ask them. Where's the funding coming from? Would you be required to do a training like that? Also, there's online and some in person, but there are trainings for environmental health and safety, EHS. Depending on the project and depending on the discipline, the lab, and what you might be handling in the lab, there are different EHS trainings. So you would talk with your supervisor about what trainings might be required of you based on the project you're working on. Also, there's Maker Lodge training, and if you're a mechanical engineer and working in maybe the hobby shop or something like that, then there's certain trainings you would have to take to be able to use machinery. So all things to be thinking of and discussing with your supervisor. And lab policies, again, I mentioned that already. And communicate. I can't emphasize communication enough, because when we do see issues that UROP students might have in a UROP and on their project, it's usually because of a lack of communication or unclear communication. And it can go both ways, both on the student's part and the supervisor's part, especially if you have more than one supervisor. So talk to your supervisor and maintain ongoing communication. And if you're ever not sure of something, ask for help, whether it's of the lab, the supervisor, of UROP staff, or someone else. Also, once you fund your UROP and you've worked out all those details, you have to submit a proposal. Every single term that you do a UROP, you submit a proposal. Even if it's the same project in the same lab that you're continuing from spring to summer, you submit a spring proposal, you submit a summer proposal as well. So the biggest probably time sink for the UROP proposal is the write-up, the written proposal that you write, in your own words, explaining who you're working with, what the project is, what your research role and goals are, and a brief personal statement. On average, most of those proposals are 1 to 2 pages. A lot of supervisors and labs might want to review it first before you submit it in our online system. So you would talk to your supervisor about that. If you write it up, do they need to read it first, or are they okay with it, and then you would just submit it. So then there's a student application system online. The link is there. You can access it from the UROP website. You submit it online. Once you submit it, it goes to the UROP faculty supervisor for review. They will review it, and almost, not quite 100%, but majority of the time, they will approve it. It then goes to the UROP coordinator for that department, lab, or center. They review it. Then it comes to UROP staff for review. And if we have questions or concerns about the project, the proposal, we will email you to ask for clarification. If the written proposal's not specific enough or clear enough, we'll ask for a revision. We wouldn't just, outright reject it. If it's too brief because it's one paragraph, we'll ask for a revision. If we have a question or concern about maybe you're doing something that we're unsure of, we'll ask for clarification. If you're applying for UROP direct funding, once it comes to us, it can take us 2 weeks on average, sometimes a little bit more, to figure out if we can fund you. So there might be a holdup on a direct funding application. One thing I didn't mention earlier with direct funding, IAP is the only term we don't offer UROP direct funding, and it's such a brief term, period of time. That is why. All other terms, including summer, we will consider funding students. Faculty, however, or departments can fund you in IAP, so there's always that option. And heed the terms application deadlines. I can't emphasize that enough. You need to meet the terms deadlines. Around direct funding, that deadline is always earlier than the standard UROP application deadline if it's for faculty funding, credit, or volunteer. For example, this spring, the direct funding deadline, if you want to request funds from us, is, I believe, the second week of February. It's always a Thursday. So let's say the second, maybe third Thursday of February is direct funding. It's not until end of March, I believe, late March, that the deadline is for spring, if it's faculty funded, credit, or volunteer. So there's a big difference there in the timing. So I just mentioned that. All the deadlines for UROP are posted for the entire upcoming year in late summer. So all the deadlines through summer 2018 are on our website. So you can always use that deadline and work backwards from there to plan out your search and your submission. And I mention that every time you do a UROP, term to term, even if it's continuing, you submit a new proposal. Mentor-mentee relationship, I've already touched upon some of these points, so I'll go through it quickly. Open communication, always maintain open communication. Meet regularly with your supervisor. Get to know your faculty supervisor. The faculty member who heads up the lab may be your direct supervisor who you work with on a daily basis. But frequently, students will have their faculty supervisor, the PI of the lab, but then on the day-to-day basis, they have someone else they're working with, whether it's a postdoc or grad student or another researcher. So some students don't see or work with their faculty supervisor too much. That said, you should still try to cultivate a relationship with them, get to know them. You can learn a lot from them, not just about the research, but about their education and career path, and gain a lot of knowledge from them. So if your faculty supervisor is someone that you don't see on a daily or even weekly basis, make it a point to maybe meet with them once a term, twice a term, depending on their schedule. So you might need to work with their assistant to schedule something, but getting that face-to-face is really important. You'll also want them to know you, and you should know them, so you might ask them for a letter of recommendation for an internship or for grad school or things like that. So you want to get to know them and cultivate that relationship. Lab meetings, find out if lab or subgroup meetings are something you're expected to go to. And even if it's not, consider going to as many as you can. Getting to learn, especially in a large lab, what other people are doing and how does your project relate to the larger goal of the lab and projects the lab might be doing. Lab meetings are also frequently ways that students get to present the research they're working on. So you might get to present in a lab meeting, and if you do well, let's say, you might even get the opportunity to present at a conference or a poster or presentation or something like that. It's a very good experience. And advocate for yourself, be flexible, ask questions. These are some additional resources. The UROP website has a lot of information on it, including guidelines, advice on finding UROP, similar things I've gone over today, but the online application system is accessible through our website, as are the UROP coordinators, the project openings page, and additional information. And there's UROP staff information, contact info. We're conveniently located on the Infinite by Lobby 7. You probably walk past us on a daily basis. You can always just stop in. You don't have to have a meeting scheduled with us. You can just pop in if you want to ask a question. If you prefer to have a one-on-one meeting with me or one of my other colleagues, then you can email urop@mit.edu to set up a meeting, a one-on-one, and our contact info is there. UROP coordinators, as I mentioned, are valuable resources. Undergrad administrators, I haven't mentioned them yet, but every academic department has an undergraduate administrator who helps run their undergraduate program. They are great resources for UROPs, but also for any number of things. Some of you may already know the undergrad administrator in a department you might already be declared in, but you can always go talk to them. Let them know your interests, and they can let you know who in the department might be someone you should chat with based on your research interests.